WhiskyJason here, whiskey from the viewpoint of an American over here in Germany, tasting bourbon this evening together with Wilderness Trail. I have two of our guests, hosts with me today. Would you like to introduce yourselves, please?
Hey, well, I'm Jerod Smith, Wilderness Trail Distillery. Happy to be here today. Happy drinking whiskey with you all, and happy to get to talk to everyone.
Excellent. And Haley?
Hi, I'm Haley Peros, also with Wilderness Trail. Ready to get going. Excited to go through this with you guys. It's going to be a good hour.
All right, so I'm going to say hi to a couple people watching already. Bozio says hi. Expedition Whiskey says hello, and in German it's good evening. We actually have here someone who has sample sets with him. We sent out 30 sample packages. He's very excited to see what's going to happen. He's going to order something afterwards, I'm pretty sure, so we'll see about that. Marco, right. The Sea Lord, which was a sailor, he says good evening, everyone. Volker says hello to everyone else. We have Dirk's Whiskey World over here saying hi to everyone who is enjoying whiskey at the moment. He has tea in his glass. He has a little bit of throat pain, so that's no problem. Mr. Lala says aloha. I like that. We have Flurp. He's over in Poland. Good evening, folks. And we're going to talk with a couple of other people. And Sportler is also here. And it's never an evening if he's not watching. Very good. So we're going to be talking about these three whiskeys. We have here the single barrel wheat. We have the small batch. This will be in the right order here with rye. And we'll have at the end our single barrel with rye and cask strength or barrel proof. And that's going to be our lineup for this evening. So if you do have the samples there, I would recommend that you pour in the first one, and we'll talk about who are the two people that are going to accompany us this evening. Haley, what's your duties at the distillery?
So we're really bad about titles at the distillery, but I am one of the brand marketing, national brand marketing managers for Wilderness Trail. Jerod and I have two similar jobs, so that's why you get us both.
Yay!
Yeah. Basically everything from, national account management, brand education, social media management as well. So a little bit of it all.
All right. And Jerod, with you, what are your duties?
Yeah, pretty much the same. Just to kind of elaborate, on what Haley was saying. At Wilderness Trail, we do. We view this as a lifestyle as much as a job, right? And we really take it to heart. And me and Haley, you might find us, in your local, if you're in the States, in the local, your local liquor store on Thursday night doing a sampling, and we might have just 10 people show up. We might be in front of a crowd of 1,500 at a big whiskey event doing an hour talk. Nothing's too small or too big for us. And that's kind of the way we feel about the bourbon. It really fits all occasions. So just like Haley, love to just travel around, talk about whiskey, talk about Wilderness Trail, but just Kentucky bourbon in general. We're such a fans of the whole genre, the whole brand is just amazing.
All right, excellent. Now, I'm over here in Germany, as we've mentioned before, and what we did with N10 bourbons together was we imported a whole pallet worth of whiskey over here. Half of it was Wilderness Trail, these three, so we have 300 bottles at the moment. They're almost sold out. Just today, some negotiations are going on with Wilderness Trail to get the next pallet to be coming over here also, so that we'll have a supply. There are a couple different stores, online shops in Germany that have this. Dine Whiskey has it at the moment. Beowine has it at the moment. Whiskey.lu in Luxembourg has it at the moment. And a few others might actually jump on the train or the bandwagon after this, because 24 different retailers in Germany also receive sample packages. And for them, as our online retailers, they're interested a little bit in this this brand, which is basically brand new here to Germany. So let's talk about this first one. What is Wilderness Trail? And we'll drink a little bit, talk a little bit, drink a little bit, talk a little bit. So I think in Germany, one of the things we like to do is not talk too much before we have the first drink and the first smell. So tell us a little bit about what we have in this wonderful bottle.
Yeah, sure. Let's go ahead and get started with the drinking. That's kind of our motto too. It seems that Jerod's jokes are funnier once we get going on a few sips. So we'll start here. We're going to start with the yellow label. So this is our wheated bourbon. So it's going to be 64% corn, 24% wheat, 12% malted barley. It is a bottled and bond. So with that being said, of course, your proof is going to be 100 proof always, minimum of 4 years old. And of course, the significance of bottled and bond, just guaranteeing, under federal law that it is made by us, aged by us, bottled by us, all those fun things. So taking all the rules of bourbon and, adding another layer.
Bringing them up to the next level, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we'll go ahead and get started on this one. This one, I love our wheated. It really hits all the notes that you want out of a wheat. Really light, bright, bright on the palate. A lot of citrus, a lot of honey, caramel, butterscotch, those notes. A little bit of that oak influence coming in really nicely.
All right, so let's try.
Yeah, hitting the spot. Yeah, everyone try. And then of course, I don't know, I always welcome tasting notes from.
Exactly. In the chat, please write down any tasting notes you'd like. That'd be great, so that we can also have that going on here. Now, this is a little bit special, at least for me. Excuse me. Don't swallow and breathe at the same time. This is a wheated whiskey. Could you tell us a little bit about wheated bourbons?
A little bit about them?
Yeah, about the wheated bourbons. Yeah, we have a lot of people over here in Germany that know Scotch, and they don't know a lot about bourbon. So you have to kind of start at the beginning and help us through the preschool, kindergarten, up to the big boys, okay?
Sure. A wheated bourbon is especially kind of a specialty offer. Rye is much more common grain, and you'll see it obviously in your whiskeys and everything. And so it's a little bit of a different offer, a little bit of a niche offer. And for those that love that palate, tend to flock to wheated bourbons. So of course, it being a bourbon, so bourbons have their rules, right? It's got to be at least 51% corn. It's got to be in a new charred oak container.
Don't you just love it? It doesn't say barrel; it says container in the laws.
One of our owners, Dr. Heiss, is looking at a way to do it in a casket. We're always experimenting. So yeah, just a container. And so and it's got to be. There's a lot of rules when it comes to making bourbon, and of course, being made in the U.S. is the prominent one. It doesn't have to be made in Kentucky, but we know all the best ones.
People in Kentucky say in Kentucky straight bourbon's the best, right?
That's right. So
excellent.
Yeah, so that's a little bit about the wheat itself. With that, of course, we locally source our wheat. So we work with a farmer from 3 miles away from our facility to make sure that we're getting quality grains, quality product, all that fun stuff.
All right. So very local, very sustainable, very, very close by. That grain to glass moment is with Wilderness Trail possible. Excellent. Now, tell us a little bit about the history here. You talked about a Dr. Heist. So throw out the names a little bit. We have Shane and so on. So who started this? How did this all happen? Now that we've had a little bit to taste here.
Jerod, you go ahead with that.
Oh, sure. So, yeah, we've got a great history. And what's good about our history is our story is all true. I say that because I'm not for sure how things are over there, in Europe. But when it comes to advertising here, you get a lot of those homespun tales. A lot of liberties are taking with the truth when it comes to copywriting and stuff like that.
My great granddad.
Exactly. Everybody's got great grandpa's recipe. Uncle Billy Ray's got his yeast strain they still are using, and they're using this creek water down here that's just magic, and all that's kind of cool. And sometimes that stuff is true, if not, over laden a little bit with stuff there. But for the most part, though, we think that bourbon is such a great story that it can stand on its own, right? And that's the same thing about our distillery. So we're not owned by any big conglomerate. We're truly a craft startup. So Wilderness Trail started up back in 2013. Before that, though, we had history helping other distillers with their fermentation issues. We sell yeast. I know we talked about Dr. Heist, Dr. Pat Heist. which is Pat's I guess Pat's just a second generation American. His parents were grandparents were German immigrants that came over.
I did not know that. Excellent.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they migrated to the Cincinnati, northern Kentucky area, and then his father moved in down into southern Kentucky. So we got some little of that heritage there. But Pat is a microbiologist, so he's a plant pathologist. He's one of the world's foremost fermentation experts. So when it comes to yeast and different issues that can affect that fermentation, he is the man to call. Pat is still just in his mid-40s, but he is already world-renowned at the top of his game with that. And then Shane, our master distiller, the other owner we have, he's a mechanical engineer. So whereas Pat's all about the biological aspect of it, right, getting the best out of our smallest little employees, the yeast, Shane's all about the process of it, being efficient, being able to keep, the best flavor through the distillation. Our steel manufacturer, Vendome, they've been making distilling equipment for over 100 years. But we actually implemented some new designs into our still based on Shane's drawings. They now put in their other production stills.
Great.
So we've really always taken that approach to always trying to find those best practices. That really scientific approach to bourbon. Now, when it comes to bourbon, you got to be careful because when you start talking science, a lot of people start thinking that you're going to ultra age something, trying to hyper age it, trying to make something that tastes 10 years old in just 2 months. Putting speakers in the rick house next to the barrels to get that sonic vibration. Cycling the pressures and the temperatures. That doesn't work. The smartest people in the world have tried stuff like this for 200 plus years, and there's just no way to fake it. It takes time in that barrel. It takes craft to get it in that barrel. And so we focus on the science behind that. And science is just a process, right? Science is not good or bad. It's just a process. So we're always looking to learn. We're always looking to improve our process and our recipe. One big thing we do in our process that's different from most distilleries our size, I guess any distillery our size, is we do a sweet mash process at Wilderness Trail. And I'll go more in depth in that in a little bit. But that, along with a lot of other stuff, lets us put our fingerprint at Wilderness Trail on what we do, while still making a very, I don't want to say a common product, because bourbon is not common, but it has those same flavors you expect in most bourbons. Bourbons get those vanillins, those vanilla flavors, get those caramel, that oak, that char, and those are kind of the big four that stereotypically you'll get out of a bourbon. And so we're always looking for ways to enhance those, plus add other stuff in there with that natural bourbon process. Haley was talking about, what makes a bourbon, all those rules and regulations and stuff. It's cool that you have those because it keeps the product really pure. And that's the fun stuff is getting in there and tweaking those. It's kind of like, race car driving, in a big league race car, Formula One, stuff like that there's limits on what you can do. And it's all about just a half a degree of wedge, here, half a PSI of air pressure here. And that's what we're looking at the Wilderness Trail.
All right. So the first question is, why the name Wilderness Trail? How did that happen?
And Haley, if you don't mind, I'm going to take this one too.
No, you're the history guy.
Yeah, I majored in history, and history is just my passion, and that's something we take great pride in. So the Wilderness Trail is an actual thing, as vaguely as it is named. But when you think of America, think of for the folks who had that mental map in their head. You got the Appalachian Mountains, coming in about 150 miles from the eastern seaboard. So the Appalachian Mountains, that ancient mountain range right there. Excuse me, I'm gonna get a drink here. I got choked there. Yeah. So that big mountain range that caused a problem for the colonists. As they came into the eastern seaboard and started getting crowded after the American Revolutionary War, when we started expanding into the American West. There was not a good way across those mountains except for one or two good paths. And that one good path would be the Wilderness Trail. It came across a famous gap in the mountains, or a famous couloir in the mountains called the Cumberland Gap, that then led through the wilderness into that rich, fertile bluegrass land of Kentucky that then very quickly gave birth to bourbon because that fertile land on that Wilderness Trail was very isolated from back east. So we kind of eschewed the old world recipes, wasn't making that rye whiskey anymore. And we started adding those new world aspects to it, like that corn. And that's where, the bourbon came from. So the Wilderness Trail is kind of like the bourbon road. It leads from folks that know Kentucky. It leads, from Danville, where we're at, to Bardstown, which is the bourbon capital of the world, up to the bourbon city of Louisville. So it's really historical for a lot of aspects, and bourbon's definitely one of them.
All right, very good. So we also mentioned the two founders, Shane Baker and Pat Heist. They did not meet actually making bourbon. They met somehow making music. Wasn't that the case?
Yes, totally. They met in a rock band. They have a mutual friend that was a drummer that was trying to form a band and brought them together. And it's funny. I recently found this out, that they ended up kicking that drummer out of the band.
Oh, I did not know that either. Interesting. Okay.
I know. I thought that was so funny. But yeah, they met in a rock band, and pretty quickly realized that rock and roll wasn't going to pay the bills quite like they thought it would. Maybe not the straight path to success. So that's how they at least met, and really, they figured out that they were the only two really working, really trying to make the band work, everything like that. And they both are just huge bourbon lovers. And so when they, the more they talked about bourbon, the more they were like, oh, wow, this might be something for us then, And so they kind of shifted gears away from rock and roll and more towards the science side of things. So that's how they ended up down the road with Firm Solutions. Yeah, our fermentations company.
Exactly. Firm Solution, as I was told, basically they always had the idea one day to have their own distillery, but it takes a lot of money and a lot of experience. And so basically what they did is they consulted for almost 20 years with other companies, fixed all their mistakes, learned all they needed to from them, had enough money to finally start this up themselves. Is that in a nutshell basically what happened? Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yes. Distilleries are not cheap, at least the ones to certain scale and certain size. And truly, not only was it obviously beneficial because they learned so much. Like you said, they were in and out of distilleries all across the nation, all across the world, and every type, not only are we talking, not just bourbon, not whiskey distilleries, but also vodka, rum, tequila, working with also major ethanol companies. So learning not only on every size of the scale as far as distillation goes. But also, the money aspect of it. Shane's business acumen really has been beneficial for us to be able to do things like wait 4 years to release a product. And, it makes us, we don't have to be beholden to anybody else, right? We can make those decisions on our own and do, they were able to do things kind of more the way they wanted to because of having that startup capital to help out.
All right. I'm going to share my screen just very briefly because not everyone knows, first of all, where is Kentucky? So here's the USA. So we have up here basically then New York, and where I come from Virginia, and then we zoom in here to someplace called Kentucky. And all the way down here is some place called Danville. Not everyone knows about Danville. We know maybe about Lexington. We know about Frankfurt. Buffalo Trace, we know about Louisville, and so on. But you guys are down here away out of the normal Bourbon Trail event down there. You have the Ponderosa Speedway close by and so on. So it is a big city, but you're not really there where a lot of people would think you're there. Why Danville, if I may ask?
Danville, for a couple reasons. It's basically Shane's hometown. He's from the next county over, so he's only about 20 miles away. But it's from a much smaller town. So as small as Danville is, that was always the big city to Shane. Pat doesn't have any ties to Danville. He didn't, so when they were looking somewhere to locate the business, Firm Solutions, a big part of what we do is shipping yeast out, right? So we needed to be somewhere that made sense as far as logistics. And lucky for us, UPS their American headquarters, I guess their global headquarters, is in Louisville, Kentucky, just 50 minutes away from us. So that really makes our shipping logistics flow very nicely. So it could have been other places. We even at times thought about leaving Danville, going to other places, just because a lot of towns, especially after the big recession in the late 2000s, a lot of different communities were offering very large tax breaks to locate businesses there. And when they were, a very young company with Firm Solutions, trying to make things go, those things looked very attractive to them. But I'm so glad we stayed in Danville. Danville doesn't have much of a whiskey presence since American Prohibition, so since the early 1930s, but it had a whole lot before then, and we're so happy to bring that back. Danville really, we call it the city of first. Pretty much anything that happened west of the Appalachian Mountains happened in Danville, Kentucky first. So it's a very historic city, which is funny speaking to Europeans about history. Like when our history is like 1770s, 1780s, that's when it really gets into that kind of history. But for Kentucky though, that has been so that's really the origin for us. Yeah.
I used to often be in a house from 1520, and it's just like Americans kind of go, well, yeah. All right, let's go back to bourbon and so on. As I said, we're over here in Europe. We don't always know what bourbon means. We don't always know what straight means. You went right, Haley, into what bottled and bond is, which is important, but maybe we should slow down a tiny little bit and go back. We have two words on the label here. We have the word single barrel, which is important, and we have Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. So single barrel, we understand. Yeah, we have single barrel also over in Europe and so on, and in Scotland and Ireland, and that's no problem. But tell us, what is Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, and then once again, slow down and tell us, and what's the difference between the bottle and bond?
Sure.
Oh yeah, so I'll handle the straight part there. So the Kentucky straight is something that's really important for us to have on there. Number one, Kentucky bourbon. It's just good.
Kentucky is the state. If it was from Texas, it'd be Texas straight. Right. So it's just always the location.
Yeah, so that means where it's fermented, made, and aged out here. So you can't bring it in from another state and let it stay here for that kind of stuff. Now, the straight bourbon is where you get into some of those specifications that's codified into United States federal law. And what that means is, well, first, if you're just a whiskey, you have much less requirements than a bourbon. So whiskey is just going to be a distilled spirit made from a cereal grain, oats, wheat, whatever, right? Then when you get that bourbon, like Haley mentioned, you're going to be at least 51% corn. Then you're going to have that aging requirement of being aged in new charred oak. And then you'll start having some aging requirements depending on what you call it. So if you say it's a straight bourbon, it's going to meet all the requirements of a bourbon, but then now it's going to be at least 2 years old to be a straight bourbon. If it's under 4 years old, you have to have the age on it. So if it's a 3-year-old,
so it's 4 years old, at least.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. So so if you're a Kentucky straight bourbon that you're 3 months old, a lot of times you'll see them put like 36 months on there to make it seem older, that kind of stuff. It's just where they have to kind of include that. But then just kind of harp on some, you guys were talking about earlier, that bottle and bond. So to be a Kentucky straight bourbon bottle and bond, we follow more regulations, more hoops to jump through than any other spirit in the world in order to meet that justification. I mean, there's so many markers you have to go through to hit that, which usually government regulation is bad, but for bourbon it's good because it protects the brand and protects the flavor. You always know you're getting a quality product with that.
Yeah. Exactly. Thank you very much. So I'm going to say hi very briefly to Greg. He's over in Paris, France. He's never heard of the distillery, so we're not just doing we have people from Poland, we have people from Austria down in Vienna, we have people over in Paris, so we're doing a European launch here of Wilderness Trail, more or less. So that's kind of really, really cool. Thank you very much. And of course, with bourbon, we have the mash bill, 51% corn minimum, and the other grains can be different. We have here our wheat. What's the main difference between wheat before we move now on to our rye, our small batch?
Sure. So wheat, the flavor profiles are just going to be different. And what's pretty exciting about actually what's coming up is, honestly, if you guys have separate, bring on another glass or do a side-by-side here. So as I mentioned, see, You're ready to go already. So This is 64% corn, 24% wheat, 12% malted barley. Now we're going to introduce this, which is 64% corn, 24% rye, 12% malted barley. So this is one of my favorite kind of side-by-side tests as far as flavor profile goes.
I love it too.
Right? Well, because, we're talking, these are both bottled and bond. So going back to the bottled and bond, right, it's got to be, 100 proof. So these are both the same proof. They're going to be a minimum of 4 years old. So they can't be any less than 4 years old if they're bottled and bond, which is another reason why we don't have the age statement on the bottle. And with that, you've got the same proof around the same age, and then just substituting out that 24% wheat for 24% rye. And so this is really a good way to show just really the difference between a wheat and a rye bourbon, or just wheat and a rye flavor profile at all. Wheats have different chemical structures that give you a lot of those more, like it's got acetyl, diacetyl, things like that give you these more like butterscotch notes. It's going to give you, it can give you more of those green apples, give you more of that honey notes, things like that. It tends to be brighter, and it tends to be less spicy is what I'm going to say.
Exactly. Thank you. Keep it simple for us at this moment. Yeah.
Yes, less spicy, right? It is.
I always compare it a little bit to bread. We know what wheated bread toast is, and we know what rye bread is over here. We eat a lot of rye bread in Germany, and that taste is, okay, I got it, no problem. All right.
Right. There you go. See, it's very similar though. That wheat and the rye, even in the bread, is going to show a lot of difference. Wheats tend to also take longer to age.
Yes.
They really, you need to be a really good wheat. I mean, I've tasted younger wheats that have been fine, but to be a really good wheat, 4 years in the barrel is a minimum, truly.
5% is better, right?
Yeah. Otherwise, it gets too the oak becomes too powerful and it's too strong, and it takes on way too many of those flavors, which is great later on down the road, but early on it's really strong. Whereas rye, getting into our black label now, this rye bourbon it's going to be spicier. It's just going to come across as a stronger flavor profile. A lot of ryes tend to have a lot of those spices, cooking spices, not chili spices, baking spices, right? You're going to have
spice, a little bit Christmassy type of baking spices, right?
Absolutely. Think Christmas, think, gingerbread men and Christmas treats and all those things.
For the Germans, Lebkuchen, all right? So
yes.
That's gingerbread in German, right?
I would butcher that if I tried to.
Don't worry.
But yeah, so it's going to be a little bit of those baking spices. It tends to be have a more darker feel to it. The wheat was very bright, right? It was honey, it was citrus, it was all these, colors that you can, in the world that are bright. And this one's more baking spices, clove, dark chocolates, things like that. So it's really, rye doesn't take that as long to reach a better maturation in the barrel. And it's really just a more volatile, type of grain anyway.
So we have 2 bottle and bond on the table, bottlings, and so therefore they have to be 50%. That's the rules in the United States. If it's a bottle and bond product, it is 50%. 100 proof is what they say in the States. Over in Europe, we use percentages, so it's 50%. And these whiskeys are available at the moment in Germany. I and my company, my partner company, over in UK, brought over a pallet. We're working on the second pallet. They will be in Germany. I do not know if we have plans to expand to France and other countries, but I'm sure you're not even in all 50 states at the moment, are you?
No, we are currently in 34 states.
Congratulations on that. I mean, come on. Yay.
Yeah, we're making it.
Yeah. You're in the UK, you're now in Germany. What other countries of the world have you opened up?
We only specialty stuff for Australia, surprisingly. but otherwise, no. Only in 34 states, and just still learning to grow.
Yeah, and the problem is you have such a demand in the States for your products that you don't have anything left over for the rest of the world yet. You did crank up capacity. You changed a little bit from pot still also to column still a few years ago. Would you mention that, and what do we have in front of us probably therefore?
Yeah. So a good way to tell with us, Jason, is if you look on the side of the bottle in the description, it'll say either if it's copper pot distilled or column distilled.
Excellent. Okay, very, very good. So I have to go back here. Good. Keep on talking, and I'll see if I can find
So when we started up back in 2013,
copper column distilled in this one, and this also says so copper pot. Oh, looky here! I did not. I learned. I very good. So I like this much better. Maybe it's because of the copper pot. Who knows? But this is the copper. Okay, this is our still. This is our pot. Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. So when we started up back in 2013, we started up with a pot still. You know, your pot still is your oldest type of distillation. It's a batch type system. So everything you do is a batch. Meaning, you got to put your mash in it, then you turn your heat on, you go through your range of temperatures. Again, distillation is all just about different boiling points, right? So you run through a range of temperatures. Once you reach your highest temperature, you're done with your run. You empty it out, clean it, you start back over. That batch is done. So it gives you some good pros with that, and that it gives you a whole lot of control over it. You can really dial that pot still in if you have the right equipment. But the big drawback, the negative to it, is that it is very inefficient. Because it is a batch system. So for us on a 250-gallon still, it would take us, which is about 1,000 liters or so, it would take us a full day's work to get one barrel, 153-gallon.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So we stayed there, with that for, 2.5 years. And then in 2016, we saw the opportunity to expand because the bourbon market just kept growing.
Yep.
So then we went to column distillation. We moved from our little facility downtown Danville, Kentucky, and we bought a farm. So we moved just about a mile and a half away, and now we've got about 240 acres. We're producing about 250 barrels a day.
So a little bit of the farm you can see here. All right, so this is the distillery. So it's beautiful. I did not make it when I was in Kentucky a few years ago. I will have to make it next time. That was fabulous. To see what you're doing there. And there's a wonderful video online where you can actually see the column stills being installed there. That was the Bourbon Trail. Beautiful, beautiful thing. So the first question, if I may ask, is what is your capacity at the moment then with the column stills? And how do you do sweet mash with column stills? Maybe you could also answer that a little bit.
Sure. So for capacity, I have no, let's see, we're going to be making about 3.5 million proof gallons a year. So when we think about
proof gallon, we have to think in liters times 3.8. So you have to go up about over 10 million liters a year here.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of big.
And that proof gallon would be at 50% alcohol or 100 proof, right? Is how they would measure that. Okay. So that's what we make. Now, I do want to add, because we talk about our capacity, we're making a lot of whiskey right now. We're about the 16th or 17th largest whiskey producer in America.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. But we still don't have a whole lot to sell for two reasons. Number one, because the lag in aging, right? So, what we made back then on the pot still, is there wasn't a whole lot of that. But also when we expanded, like you mentioned, it's very expensive to expand. It's millions and millions of dollars. And our two owners aren't rich men. I mean, they're very rich on paper. They're gonna be really rich one day. But yeah, they didn't have the kind of money just to finance this by themselves. So about half of our production we do sell as that white unaged whiskey. And that's how we finance our day-to-day operations. We'll take that, we'll put it in a barrel, we'll rent out the space, and we'll kind of be the controller of that for them with that. But doing the sweet mash, though, I'll switch gears to that. That is our calling card. The sweet mash is a process that's the oldest process in fermentation, and that's just starting every fermentation from scratch. So you start every fermentation with fresh water, fresh grains, fresh yeast. There's nothing reused in there. Exactly. And that's going to be contrary to sour mash. And sour mash being the method Here in America, we think of it as being popularized by Dr. James Crowe at what is now the Woodford Reserve Distillery. That's bunk. This is stuff that the brandy industry in France was doing in the 16th century, right? So it's just another little transfer of technology across the ocean. But yeah, so excuse me. With that, excuse me, got choked on my whiskey there. With that sour mash, you're using maybe 20 to 30% of that old batch back into the next batch. And that's going to be because it becomes very acidic. It'll get down into the 2s on the pH scale. So it becomes very acidic. So you transfer that back in. It helps control bacteria growth. Also, it's going to help you save a little bit on energy because it's going to come over very hot, almost boiling. So it helps you with your cook process, stuff like that. And then also helps you with your flavor continuity too. That's something that's very important to like the big distilleries. They want their batch they're making today taste like it did, a month ago and a year ago and 5 years ago. So for us doing the sweet mash, it's simply just start from scratch every single time. It does cause us more problems because it's a lot more hospitable to bacteria, and bacteria is the number one nemesis. That's nobody ever talks about bacteria, but that's what we fight against on a daily basis that can affect our flavor more than anything else that we could ever talk about. But yeah, so it makes it more susceptible to bacteria. Also, by starting from scratch every time, you do worry about flavor drift, about your flavor profile drifting. But for us, we don't really worry about that because that's kind of our market professionalism. We do have a full service laboratory on site that we do testing for all of the other biggest brands in American whiskey. So we do get the quality control with that. So it's our way of not only showing that we know how to do things a little bit better, let's just say better. We know how to do things a little bit more difficult and still do it at a high level. But also you get some better flavors because it all is made from scratch, not just 70% fresh or 80% fresh in that batch. The other big difference is it comes off of the still. So that new whiskey, that white whiskey comes off of the still at a much more neutral pH. It will be in maybe the 5.5 to 5.8 pH range versus a lot of distilleries that do the sour mash. They're coming off at maybe 3.7, 3.5, and that's a huge difference. Whenever you drink our white whiskey, it's a sipping whiskey. I mean, it's not something that you can take lightly because it's so strong. You're looking at about it's 139 proof, so 69% alcohol right on the still, but it is absolutely delicious and so flavorful and fruitful at that rawness of it, and that's something that the sweet mash does give us. And I've been talking forever about sweet mash, so I think we got some questions here.
Real quick, the column stills, are they made from copper or stainless steel, or is it a combination of both?
100% copper. All of our distilling equipment is copper. The only stainless steel you'll find in our distillery is in our plumbing or in our transfer lines around. We want that copper, number one, because it looks cool as hell. It looks really awesome having all that copper up there. It's very Victorian steampunk looking, but also it provides a lot of functional advantages for us. The copper does conduct heat very well, right? But also it helps take a lot of the sulfur compounds out of the process stream. It removes that from the whiskey. So copper is very, very important for us.
Very, very good. Let's go back to our small batch, and then we'll go to a different question in a moment. I think this was one fermentation tank, wasn't it, your small batch? Is that correct?
Well, I'm sorry. So I think what you're referring
from
to
a single fermentation batch, is that still going on in the future, or is it different now because of the column stills?
It is different because of the column stills.
Yeah, gotcha.
We do have two different fermentation areas. So we're fermenting about 12 barrels worth and about 60 barrels worth at a time. But on all of our pot distilled stuff, now this is really getting into some minutia here, and this does not absolutely mean any better flavor, what I'm getting ready to say or anything. But we really think that on our pot distilled stuff, that it is one of a kind in the world, and that it is the most single batch you can get. So yeah, all of the pot distilled stuff is a single fermentation, and then on the single barrel stuff, it's a single fermentation, single barrel. So it's one barrel, one fermentation. It literally shares nothing else in common with any other barrel of whiskey in the world. Even if you're like, when we're doing 12 at a time, that's 12 barrels coming from that fermentation. You will have some similarities with that. And if I may just jump in real quick too, since we're talking about column and pot stills. I'm a bourbon lover. I'm a student of bourbon, so I like to try to dispel stuff when I can. I spent a lot of my life before I got into the industry thinking that pot distilled meant better. It meant the craft was there. It was more old timey. It was a better way to do it. And I'm a firm believer now that it does not. Sure, pot distill can give you some really good stuff. We're a testament to that. But once you get your recipe dialed in and get your process dialed in, a column still gives you much more consistency than you could ever.
Exactly. The word is consistency. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because we want everything coming off of the still to be the same. Now, we want our products to taste difference, right? But we want the difference to come from that barrel, from the blending process, from the aging, from the rickhouse position where it's stored at, and from the recipe. We don't want the fermentation style or whatever to come off with that, right? So it's something we do for that. What we believe it just brings us a more complete product.
Yep. Very good. So we have the wheated, we have the rye. This is single barrel. This is small batch. About 12 barrels, or is it a little bit different now?
A little bit different now. So up until maybe last year.
Yeah. Like early 2020.
Early 2020, early 2020, we started doing about 20 barrels to 21 barrels for our batches. So fermentation got bigger, batches got bigger.
Right. No problem. Any rotation, any heating, any other special parts of your warehouses you can mention?
No, we,
and that's good and that's important.
It is. It's funny as scientifically oriented as we are. Yeah, we're not trying to do anything to expedite the aging process. No gimmicks. Once the barrel is there, it's only moved for a logistics reason. Right. Otherwise, it stays. We don't heat or regulate our temperatures in our warehouses either. So, obviously the lower levels are going to be cooler than the upper levels, and they'll vary, several degrees as far as temperature goes. So, but yeah, no gimmicks. No, we're traditional with our barrels as well. 53 gallon sized for our barrels, and we use a level 4 char for our barrels as well. So yeah.
And do you a preferred supplier for your barrels? Are you usually it's Kelvin or it's ICE International Stave Company, ISC?
We use ISC. Every once in a while, we'll do some Kelvin barrels just for fun or to experiment with or offer something special. But the vast majority of our barrels are ISC. We love working with them. Those guys are also just so
scientifically honed into making the best product at all. I'm subscribed to their newsletter, and they were just talking about the barrel scene in Australia. It was just like amazing what's going on with them. Not just Kentucky, not just USA, but the whole world. They're actually supplying and trying to make the best barrel possible for all different types of spirits. I was there. I was in awe in Lebanon, Kentucky. I'm a fan of International Stave Company, ISC, and they won over my heart. Sorry.
No, it's great. They are exactly that, though. They are super scientists. They are incredibly passionate about what they do. And yeah, it's not just whiskey. It's not just in America. It's everywhere, and it's everything. So they kind of have a similar approach to their craft as we do. So it's nerds uniting.
And we move on to the rye. Can you talk about the mash bill a tiny little bit? And the question is, will there ever be a 100% rye? So never say never.
I'll never say never. I don't know if we will ever do a 100% rye. Right now, our biggest focus is just making enough of this to make sure you guys get some. Yep. So, every once in a while we'll experiment on some things, some different, 4-grain product and stuff like that. But really, Shane and Pat's love our more traditional style things anyway. This rye in particular is more akin to a pre-prohibition style rye. And so it's not like your, like a New England style rye where it's, or an Empire rye or 95 to 100% rye. This one is only 56% rye, 33% corn, and 11% malted barley. And with that, it's also a Kentucky straight. So in order to be a Kentucky straight rye, it's got to be at least 51% rye. So instead of being 51% corn like it is for a bourbon, it's 51% rye for a rye whiskey. So this is barely meeting that mark, but that low rye content is just kind of more traditional. It's more of a Kentucky style rye. And these guys, part of the reason why we choose our mash bills is based off of, what do we like to drink?
Yep, exactly. So I'm going to go to the next point, if I may, and that's barrel proof. All right. So I have my Elijah Craig barrel proof here. I have 68%. All right. So now we have barrel proof here with 51%. Yes. Germans don't understand this yet. Why do I have 60 plus here, and why do I have barely 50 plus here? What's the secret, and what's the magic going on?
So obviously it's just a few things. One of it is, obviously flavor profile, what you're looking for flavor profile wise. The other is ryes also have they have their own enzyme content. And so they can ferment without the additional need of a lot of barley and things like that. So you can work more with ryes. But with it, it's mostly about flavor. And it's, a lot of it's based off of things like tradition as well, right? Which Jerod can speak more to that than I can. But for us, that low rye content really does something to the flavor for us. We believe, a lot of ryes, especially those high ryes, 100% ryes, it's a lot of heat sometimes. Now, for people who enjoy that's great. For other people, that turns people off. They see that and they're like, oh no, I don't need all the spice, and we believe that it really allows for the rye flavor profile to expand. When you have a high rye content, it's very dense in that flavor. It's a lot of spice and it's real intense. Where with a lower rye content, it blends out with the corn, it blends out with the barley, and it allows for that rye profile to expand and really allows you to then taste all the different flavors that come in with the rye, right? And you're not your palate's not overwhelmed by just all the spice coming at you all at once. So this one in particular too, so we think it's really floral. It's got a lot of nice like honey and floral flavors, Earl Grey tea, things like that. Flavors that you don't normally expect if you're used to drinking a higher rye content whiskey. So it's kind of eye-opening to a lot of people to go, oh, I didn't know rye could taste like this, I didn't know it could have all this to it, so it's really eye-opening in a lot of ways. So that's kind of our thought process behind why it's only at a 56% instead of, at 80 or 100% rye.
Okay. And Jerod, would you mind talking about the barrel proof, why it's so low?
Absolutely.
In comparison to others.
Right. So when it comes to barrel proof or barrel entry proof, so you're talking about a bourbon or a straight whiskey, there's a limit on how strong the alcohol can go into that barrel for aging. It's going to be 125 proof or 62.5%. There's a limit because too much alcohol, you won't get the flavor that you need. You need that water there to help break down those organic compounds in the wood and be a catalyst between the alcohol and the wood to help form all these new compounds over time. So you definitely need that. That's why there's the upper limit. Most people go in at 125 because if you do a lower proof, you're diluting it down and you're increasing the volume, which means more barrels, and more barrels
more
means more money, right? Absolutely. Yeah. But going at a lower proof also gives you more water to help with more flavor extraction. So we do 110 proof on our bourbon, and we have done some rye at 110 proof. But then a lot of our rye whiskey has gone in the barrel at 100 proof, or just 50% alcohol, and that would represent the barrel you're drinking from right now. So it went in that barrel at a really low proof, and to my knowledge, that's the lowest barrel entry proof of any whiskey distillery in America. I think Michter's does 103 on their bourbon and rye, but the 100 for our rye I think is the lowest. And that's not trying to beat Michter's. Actually, that started out of necessity in the beginning because you get less yield from the rye. Rye doesn't have as much starches. much carbohydrates as the corn does, so you get a little bit less alcohol. So to fill that same barrel from the pot still, we had to lower the proof a little bit to get more volume in there.
Okay,
and it turned out really dang good. Those low ones, those 101 proof, 103, 104 proof like you have, those have been some of the absolute best. And that's where we get a lot of them coming in. We hear what we call these bubblegum barrels. A lot of the pink bubblegum flavor will show up in this rye. And usually on those lower proofs is when that does happen.
Is that malted rye or is that unmalted rye?
That is unmalted rye. So
because we were talking about lot 40 here, because lot 40 is also 100% unmalted rye. And Dr. Don Livermore, who was quoted a moment ago up there, the master up there in Canada, he loves to use unmalted rye because malted rye gives a special enzyme that changes the flavor profile, which really does. For some people, it's great. Other people go, ooh, not my cup of tea.
Yeah, right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, and we've even messed around with malted rye a little bit, but like Haley was saying, we like traditional bourbon, and there's still so much flavor to be developed that way that we just didn't want to add another kink to the process.
Excellent. All right, so let's taste this. I did not see any tasting notes on the small batch, but hopefully we can see 1 or 2 tasting notes here on the rye. Because I really, really enjoy this a lot. This actually, for me, tastes better than many 100% ryes that I've had in my life. Yeah.
See, this the one I have, I'm coming in tonight at 110 proof there. So a little bit stronger. Yeah.
Exactly. And mine is 103 proof. So what do you have, Ali?
116.
Very good. So this is a single barrel product. That means it varies. And also, I have actually 3 different ABVs over here in Germany. I have one 51.5. I have I think all the way up to 53%, but I only had 1 case, so I only had six bottles of it. And so I'm going to save that for a type of tasting where we can compare them like that. So, but this was all, let's see, is this this was copper pot distilled, actually, still. Hey, wow.
Hey.
So yours are also, or are they called them?
Mine's copper pot.
Yeah, my rye is copper pot, and my small batch is still copper pot. I don't know what my wheated is. Let's see.
Yeah, my wheated was called them, and the other 2 were copper pot. So
same. I'm on the same with you. The wheated, whenever we got to our column, we ran the wheated for a long time. At that time, we only had 3 grain bins, so we couldn't do like a wheated bourbon. Yeah. So we run a bunch of wheated, then run some rye bourbon and rye whiskey. Now we've got a lot more equipment and a lot more capability, capacity.
All right. So what I'm going to do is briefly go to your website and show some of these beautiful bottles you have here, which we have in front of us as well. So here you have the Kentucky Straight Rye Whiskey, which we were just talking about, always a cask strength release. Here we have the small batch that we were just talking about. Here we have the wheated that we have shown, but this we have not seen in Europe yet, unfortunately. Can you mention something about these special editions? And what else do you have there and available that we probably will never see, unfortunately, unless we come to the distillery?
Come.
Yeah. It's a little difficult at the moment with these dumb old COVID restrictions, but that's something else, all right?
Right.
Yeah.
At the moment, you can come to Europe, but we can't come to America. Sorry. Yeah, I know.
I would love to make sure you guys get some 6-year-old. It is developing really, really nice. The 6-year-old could be either our 6-year-old wheated or the 6-year-old rye recipe. So it's a little bit of both been put out there. But for now, that's it. We have those 4 expressions. We will be launching a lower proof rye whiskey in the future, but that's going to be more geared toward what we call here on premise or basically bars and restaurants, right? So a little bit lower proof, so it can be at a lower price point to get on that cocktail menu at your local restaurant a little bit better and stuff like that. You probably won't start seeing really any new product coming out other than that, except start seeing the age start creeping up on it. As we get into 2022, that is when our latest expansion starts hitting 4 years old. Okay, so that's when we start being able to have a little bit more.
That's when you have some capacity.
Yeah, so now we can start holding some back, squirrel this away. So then quickly you'll see that 6-year become 8-year. And then before you know, you'll have Wilderness Trail 10-year-old out there. So that's what we want to do is get our age up. We want to get to where all three of these, all of our quote normal products are 6 years old.
Yep.
We want that to be the baseline, the standard of what we do. Older doesn't always mean better, but there's something that really magic that happens in American whiskey in that 5, 6, 7 year age range. That we really think that 6 years is a great minimum for us to keep with that.
Very, very good. So Greg in Paris asked me which is my favorite. This is my favorite. This is my second favorite, the small batch, which means I like rye. And I do like the wheated, but I'm not a wheated fan. You can go to Weller, you can go to Pappy, you can go to our Maker's Mark. I'm not normally someone that gushes and goos about those things. I've had a few different Pappies and they were all okay, but they weren't something where I was just like, oh, this is the best whiskey of my life. It changed my view of the world. No. But I've had some ryes where I've just sat back and was like, this is fantastic. I'm just heaven. Yeah. All right. One little question about an Angel Share. We have about 5 minutes left. What is the Angel Share in Danville, Kentucky? Do you have the warehouses on site? Are they further away? How do you do all that? And maybe one sentence about bottling as well.
So Angel Share, what we'll see is basically the industry standard. We'll see that 5 to 8%, sometimes 10% the first year. But also a lot of that is the wood absorbing a lot of it too, stuff like that. And then your standard 3 to 5% every year. That is right in the norm with what we are seeing. We do age everything on site. We have a full service distillery. Sometimes we call it a campus. And I like that. They don't use the word campus in America a lot, except for colleges, right?
But
I like that. Yeah, it's all right there. We have, I think we're building Rick House number 8 right now. Just broke ground on Rick House number 9 with that. Bottling is on site. Now, bottling is our biggest bottleneck at the moment. It's where we do run into the most stuff. Our bottling service, our bottling line is still very rudimentary compared to our size. But that's because it doesn't need to be expanded yet. We'll start seeing later this year.
Next year, right?
Later this year, we'll start gearing up for that expansion. And we will definitely increase bottling because where we do make a lot of whiskey for other people, part of our business model is to also bottle that on site for them to reduce their transportation costs and to capture some of that cash ourselves.
Gotcha. All right. Last question, basically, and this each person has to answer it individually, except for, besides Wilderness Trail, name one of your favorite bourbons, please. So we always like doing that on the show. Yes, I'm sorry your boss is listening, but hey.
Yeah, our bosses drink everything too. Remember, we also make money
exactly.
from all the other brands too, because they're either buying our yeast or using our fermentation services. So it's good. I like pretty much all bourbons. There's not really a bad bourbon out there. There's just some better than others. But when it comes to hey, what's my go-to when I'm not drinking Wilderness Trail? I'd be very hard pressed to see something from Four Roses on the menu somewhere that I would not buy.
Good single barrel, right?
They're single. I don't know what the pricing is over there in Europe, but they're single barrel stuff.
Not actually. Our normal, we just have the standard single barrel. We don't have store picks and so on. So we're running about, I don't know, 40, 45 euros max. So it's okay.
So we're seeing that for like what, $35 American dollars. And it's still one of the best values in whiskey because even their standard is world class.
Very good. And Haley, what about you?
Also, same. It depends on the day, depends on the time of year, depends on if it was a rough day.
Okay. Does the proof go up on a rough day or go down?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But definitely, as Jerod said too, there's a lot of these other distilleries are our friends. We love them. We love to support them. So Four Roses. I love Weller is a great one. Even honestly, your standard like Maker's Mark can't go wrong with.
My Weller has a box.
There we go. Wow.
I bought it from France. So I mean, come on, we got a Weller 12 over here in Europe at the moment. So I actually imported either a container or a couple pallets over. So we got a supply at the moment, which is great.
All right. Yeah.
So very, very good. Our time's basically up. I want to thank both of you for having the patience with us over here in Europe that are still learning a tiny little bit about bourbon. I really am proud to be one of the people that can help and get this bourbon over here to Germany and somewhat also to Europe. So this is very, very nice. We have the rye, different variations, ABV. We have the small batch, which is always 50% because it's bottled and bond. And we have bottled and bond and single barrel with the weeded. All three of these products are available at different shops in Germany. For example, Dine Whiskey and Beelwein and other hopefully will be following soon. And I hope by Christmas to have the next pilot over here and be available for the Christmas season. Let's see if that works out. And maybe there might be a case or two of some special stuff, right?
That would be lovely.
Keep the fingers crossed. All right. Thank you very much. And all the best to Kentucky. All right.
Thank you, Jason. If I can add, man, you feel free to put my email address and I won't speak for Haley, but in the description on the video or anything like that, because anybody that does have any questions, me and Haley love to talk bourbon. Me and Haley, are educators at heart. And anybody that wants to learn more about Kentucky bourbon, it doesn't have to be Wilderness Trail, but if you have any bourbon questions and someone wants to know something, feel free to ask us. And we're always happy to promote the brand of Kentucky bourbon.
Okay, very, very good. So I just posted that here. Is that right? I just copied and paste.
Boom, that's
it. Wilderness Trail, Kentucky. The KY at the end kind of screwed me up there for a second. What's going on there? But yes, all right, very, very good. Wilderness Trail, KY for Kentucky. You're on now officially in the stream, and so everyone can contact you if they have a special question. Thank you very much, and all the best to you. Yeah, cheers.
Yes, cheers.